A guy could literally murder his landlord and you couldn't evict him. Could you imagine that? Literally, the landlord's laying dead on the ground. Other tenants are getting shot at. No, we can't evict them. That's wrong. All right, so I have an interesting article today for you from the Washington Post. And it says, a landlord's assault reignites questions about DC's eviction moratorium. Basically, what happened is a landlord was assaulted in Washington, D.C., and now they're really questioning whether this eviction moratorium is helping things or hurting things. And I'm going to get into this article. Keith Carr was not trying to spark a confrontation, much less a fist fight. The 38-year-old landlord was at one of three apartment buildings he owns on Longfellow Street in Northwest Washington's Brightwood Park on Thursday afternoon. He walked into the building to check on some maintenance. 30 minutes later, he'd run from the property, bleeding from the head, dizzy with fear and adrenaline, and become an instant emblem of the wider frustrations that have been boiling over among landlords for the last year. For the last year, landlords have been fighting against these eviction moratoriums because we've been basically put in economic ruin. And it's all so that we can protect bad tenants in many cases. Okay, tenants that didn't want to pay, that aren't suffering due to the pandemic, but basically just want to get away scot-free without paying rent. And in some places like Washington, D.C. and other places up the East and West Coast, landlords are put in a situation where they can't even get rid of the worst tenants. They're just stuck with them. These tenants are tearing up their properties, causing problems for the good tenants, and meanwhile, we can't evict them. We can't get rid of these bad people. So what are we supposed to do? Are we just supposed to suffer until the very end? Well, according to these cities like Washington, D.C., yes, you're supposed to suffer 1, 2, who knows how many years. That day, as he was coming up from the basement to the front foyer, Carr spotted a young man who had been a fixture at the building for months. Last summer, when a longtime tenant died, the woman's son stayed in the unit without paying rent. Soon, a flock of teenagers and young adults began showing up in the building, including the young man Carr now encountered. They came in and out at all hours, blasted music, and frightened other tenants, according to Carr. Yeah, the worst part is that these bad tenants oftentimes are harassing the good tenants, making these good tenants want to leave. So a landlord is put into the bad situation of, okay, now I have to keep this guy in, but my good tenants, the ones who were paying, they're leaving because they don't want to put up with the crap from these bad tenants. But there was little he could do because of the eviction moratorium put in place by DC leaders a year ago. The policy has kept thousands in their homes during the coronavirus pandemic. It also has largely frozen landlords out of the eviction court. Carr felt he was losing control of his building, and his only recourse was to remind strangers they weren't supposed to hang around the property, which is what he did when he saw the man Thursday in the foyer. Okay, so he was doing what a good landlord would do. You see somebody suspicious that you don't recognize hanging around your building causing problems, you tell them, hey, you can't hang around here. If you don't live here, get out of here. Unfortunately, due to these eviction moratoriums, this guy, he's basically considered a tenant. Oh yeah, no, I didn't lease the property to you. No, I don't know who you are. Yeah, you're causing problems, but I can't get rid of you because the DC city government says that you live here. I don't say you live here. I own the building, but according to me, nothing what I say even matters. Only thing that matters is what the DC city government says. Okay, well, that's idiotic. They're taking property rights away from landlords. They are taking the right for a person who owns the property to manage the property the way they see fit away from the landlord. And that's just not right. Arms flew at Carr. The force sent him down the stairs towards the basement. Then the young man was on top of him, the landlord said, swinging and kicking. Carr broke free and sprinted through the back entrance to his car. According to video footage from the building's cameras, his alleged attacker came out the front door, returned with friends, smashed the front glass door, and chased after Carr. It seems like they were running back to finish me off, he said. Attempts to reach the son of the former tenant were not successful. Police have made one arrest, a juvenile, in the attack, according to Carr. But the single flash of violence has also dumped further fuel onto the ongoing debate over the DC eviction moratorium. Yeah, if you have a tenant in your property and this tenant has guests over all the time who are breaking, parts of the property, harassing the other tenants, and even harassing you as the landlord, you should have the right to confront that tenant. And if the tenant doesn't make any changes, you should be able to get rid of that tenant. That tenant is a problem, okay? And it's not right that they've taken away the means for a landlord to get rid of problem tenants. It's completely ridiculous, and all in the name of a so-called, pandemic protection because of COVID. That's bullshit. Okay? I don't like to cuss, but in this situation, that is completely wrong. Okay? In the hours after Carr's attack, the Small Multifamily Owners Association, an advocacy group of DC landlords, sent an email to all members of the DC Council blaming Carr's situation on the moratorium strictures. "You're responsible for his injuries," the email began, before asking for an exception to the district's eviction moratorium for tenants who pose a threat to the health and safety of their neighbors. For Carr, still buzzing with the shock of the violence, the incident is inseparable from the district's COVID-19 response, pinning landlords between the city's policy and the realities of their business. And it is inseparable. It's absolutely inseparable. They created the situation by making it where a landlord can't evict the tenants that are in their own property for safety reasons. This guy, he got beat down by a tenant. Yeah, it was a juvenile. A juvenile could be a pretty strong 17-year-old, pretty strong 16-year-old, wild and, crazy acting, not listening to what an adult says, not respecting what the property owner says. And, if we allow this for too long, this is the end result. This is what's going to happen. Landlords are going to be pushed and abused until the point where they give up, And this isn't even going into the financial aspect. The financial aspect is even worse because it could end up with dilapidated properties, bank-owned properties, people in bankruptcy, people living in squalor because there's no one to maintain properties. I mean, is that what they want? Man, I'm so passionate about this because I can see myself getting into this situation too with my properties. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want other people like me who thought that they could get into real estate investing and, have a nice, stable investment strategy so they could add a little bit to their retirement. I don't want to see them fall into ruin because of this. It's just not right, okay? These governments need to listen right now, and fix this problem. Do not allow these eviction moratoriums to continue. Do not allow it to continue. Legal challenges have been filed against the protections on behalf of landlords, including at least 6 cases in federal court. Federal judges in some cases have declared the CDC order unconstitutional. I went over the fact that the CDC order was found unconstitutional in Ohio in another one of my videos. Others have upheld it, pitching the situation into legal confusion. And that's the problem. You go into some of these places and you'll get under these very liberal federal judges and they will say, oh yeah, this is constitutional, but they're not. These judges are more activist judges than anything. They're not looking at our constitutional protections for right to life, liberty, and property. But one place where evictions have not continued is Washington. Unlike the CDC order, the district's moratorium is a total ban on the removal of tenants. There are no exceptions for health or safety violations. Can you believe that the DC City Council, the DC government, put in such an idiotic eviction moratorium to totally ban things from people from being evicted? A guy could literally murder his landlord and you couldn't evict him. Could you imagine that? Literally, the landlord's laying dead on the ground. Other tenants are getting shot at. No, we can't evict them. That's wrong. Oh, my goodness. I start to laugh because it's so completely ridiculous. We're opposed to any exception. But if there is going to be an exception, it should be narrowly enforced, said Beth Mellon, an idiot. I mean, head of the Legal Aid Society of the District of Columbia's Housing Law Unit, an idiot, opposed to any exception, even for murder. What about rape? What about child porn, child molestation? Nothing? No exception? Oh, give me a break, okay? Give me a break. We've seen a lot of these cases that are filed where landlords are saying there are health and safety risk issues that are actually more complicated. Well, landlord getting beat down by one of the tenant's guests is not complicated, okay? He has video footage of it. They said it earlier in the article. It's not complicated. Well, I'm gonna skip over a bit of this article. You know, it goes into more tenants' rights BS. You know, I don't even like to cover that stuff. Every other news channel is covering all these tenants' rights things. This is a landlord channel. The only thing I care about is making sure that our story is told. So I'm not even going to cover that stuff in my videos, okay? But the turmoil in the building is not just a problem for the owner. A longtime tenant who spoke on the condition of anonymity because she fears for her safety said other residents are suffering due to the squatter's behavior. I have to tiptoe around my house. I'm afraid for my life, she said. I told Keith he's a very nice landlord, but I don't want to stay here anymore. I want to move. So, yeah, and like I said before, this is the end goal. The good tenants want to move out because the bad tenants get to stay. Basically, they're putting this landlord out of business, putting this landlord into danger, and putting the other tenants into danger that are staying in this building.